Hey, today we're going to talk about steak and how to cook it, the different types of steaks and what's the best way of preparing it and all that jazz. Lots of different chefs will talk about different ways and there's different techniques and there's different skills in regards to cooking the perfect steak, and we're going to go through, well, some of it. So to begin, what we're going to talk about is the different types of steaks that you have. So the ones that we have here today is a Wagyu, which is a type of breed of beef originated from Japan. It has a beautiful marbling. What that means is it has lots of little white parts, the white fatty bits, tissue in the meat grain. And what happens is when you cook this, the fatty grain starts to break down and go into the meat, so you get this maximum flavor, juiciness and tenderness that you hard to get with other steaks. That's what there's different grades of Wagyu, and I think it's 0 to 10. This is about a 6 or a 7. These things are pretty expensive. It's a rump, but the grade, as you can see, the marbling in there, it really brings out a lot of flavor and tenderness and juiciness. Other different types of steaks that you can get, other breed is like Black Angus, which is kind of breeder steaks, and they're really nice. They have heaps of rich flavors. They're really good in a mince as well. They just have a really strong meaty flavor. There's grass-fed, which has nice flavor as well, and apparently is really good for you. But I find they tend to be a little bit chewier than normal, so you need to get a higher grade of meat for that kind of stuff. And then you got your standard MSA, which is the standardization of meat and making sure that the tenderness and quality of it. So after that, what we need to do is talk about how we're going to cook it and prepare it. So when I first started cooking as a chef, one of the biggest sins you can possibly ever do was to salt a steak before cooking it. You're supposed to cook it and then salt it afterwards. The reason being is because, well, the theory of it is that when you put salt on something, it'll draw out the moisture and it'll make the steak chewy and dry. As time gone by, it's not actually quite true, because when you put salt on a steak, it does draw out a bit of moisture in it, but not really that much that will affect the steak, so that way it's chewy or dry. Actually, if anything, I find the best way of doing it is to get some salt. Get the cheaper stuff. You don't need to put your Maldon sea salt on there because that stuff's really expensive. You need to save that to the end. You can salt these at the start and allow the salt to draw out the flavors, and then the meat will redraw into the steak. A lot of the fine dine restaurants and all the fancy restaurants, what they do is when they have proteins of meats, steaks, chickens or whatever, they put it in a brine, so it's water and salt, and they let it sit overnight so that the meat absorbs all that moisture and salt and flavor, and then when you cook it, it seems more plump and fresh and more deliciousness. But you don't need to worry about doing that. You can just add a bit of salt, allow it to sit for a bit, and the meat itself will absorb the flavor, and it won't lose your, you won't get this dry steak. The only way you can really get a dry steak is if you overcook it. Now, that's something that's quite common in barbecues, because I think people are really afraid of undercooking a piece of meat like chicken or a steak when they do a barbecue. I don't know about you, but I've been to so many barbecues where the steak and the meat is just cooked to a rubber. You don't want to do that, and I'll show you how not to do that. So on a stove, full pelt, you can use them. Most people use frying pans and stuff, but I like to use a big saucepan with high edges around it at home, because when you put your steak in, it's going to bubble and fizzle out everywhere, and it makes this hell of a mess in my kitchen. And yeah, I don't like cleaning up. In a commercial kitchen, that's fine, because I got kitchen hands and stuff cleaning up after me. So it's like having a team of your own little mums running around cleaning after you. I don't have that here. I have to clean up my own mess. So I like to use a high-end thing. So a bit of oil, something that has a high smoking factor. I've done a live video in regards to talking about different oils. Don't use olive oil. It's not very good for this kind of thing. Olive oil is great for other things, but not for cooking steaks. So I use a grapeseed oil. It has a great smoke factor. It can really handle high heat, and it's really good that way. So with your steak, be really generous with your seasoning. that is where all your flavor is going to come from. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to really taste the meat. Salt really activates your taste buds to taste flavor. So you're going to get that pan super hot. You can hear it's going crazy. Get your steak in and cook it. Now, a great chef like Heston Blumenthal has talked about getting your steak to keep turning it over. He says to turn it over every 20 seconds. That way you keep the juices in the middle. I don't find that to be that effective, and I really don't want to be standing around flipping over a steak. When we learn to cook in restaurants and so forth, you're often taught to just turn it around twice. So you always put your presentation side down first. What that means is, if you look for the best looking side of your steak, and you put that down first. So you cook it for a period of time. Once it's sealed, you flip it over, and then you cook that side and you flick it back over. So your presentation side down gets it twice, and the other side gets it once. It's really handy if you have things like a char grill where you got the grills and you want those grill marks. So when you first put it down, you have those multi-grills. You flip it over, you get another set of grill, and when you turn it back over, you get in a crisscross shape. And it's really handy when you do that, because if you're cooking in a restaurant situation and you got 15 different steaks on the stove, you can kind of gauge whether you've flipped it already, because you can see the grill marks on it. I like to just go and just flip it once from there, and you get that beautiful char from that point on. You're getting a lot of oil, lots of fat coming out of it. That's where a lot of its flavour is coming from. You're going to maintain that the heat of your stove is super hot the whole time. You don't want that starting to simmer or lose any heat, because what happens, you're starting to stew your steak, and that's gross. What you want is to get that real lovely golden char, which is the Maillard effect, which is where a lot of your flavour's coming from. So it depends on what kind of, how you like your steak done. I personally like medium rare to medium. A good piece of steak should go around that area. After that, medium well to well done, I mean, it's your preference. It tends to lose a lot of its flavours, juiciness, tenderness, and everything else. So it's up to you. The best way to figure out whether a steak is done or not, as a chef, is to just poke at it and have a little feel of the toughness of it. I've seen some videos, I think Gordon Ramsay talks about how you're supposed to feel your hand, and you know, that spot is kind of medium rare. That softness there is like a rare. In the middle, like where it's really tight, that's kind of like a well done, the medium well. That kind of works if you've done a lot of steaks, but the problem is everybody's hand's slightly different in the feel of it, and it's kind of tricky because a medium rare rump and a rare rump can vary in the texture of it because of the type of meat, the type of way it was processed, how it was killed, the age, everything affects the toughness of the steak. So that's kind of tricky. The best way and the surest way is to use a meat thermometer. These things are the best way to, you just jam it in there and it'll tell you exactly whether your steak is well done, medium, or well done. Or you can get a probe thermometer. These are also really good. They will guarantee that your steak is cooked perfectly every time. But luckily for me, I've cooked these quite a few times and I have a pretty good idea of the steak. Now, from here you can actually get a lot of different flavours into this by adding different fats, butters, oils, garlic. You can use some thyme, bay leaves. Look at that. So I've got a bit of butter there, which I'm just going to put it in there. And because this is a Wagyu, it has a lot of fat in it anyway. Currently it's pretty good fat, so depends how you perceive it. Once you've done that, there you go. Here's your perfect steak. How do you like your steak cooked? Comment below and tell me what's your favorite style of kind of steaks that you like, how you like yours cooked. I'd like to get some of these flavors. I mean, obviously you can put some aromatics like thyme, garlic, cloves and everything else in that oil and then sprinkle it on there. Once you've done this, this is when you can bring out your fancy expensive salts and finish it off like that. The other key of steaks, and it's one of the most important and no one argues about this, is to let it rest. So if it's taking you 5 or 10 minutes to cook the steak, you need to allow at least 4 minutes to let it rest. If you cooked a piece of meat for 25 minutes, like a big roast or anything, you got to leave it for 5 to 10 minutes to rest. It's really, really important you do that because the meat is still really hot and it's really clenched up. And as soon as if you cut into it now, it'll release all the juices and it'll be really dry and it won't taste really that nice. So by allowing to rest, the muscles in the meat is relaxed back into it and it reabsorbs all that and holds all that moisture and flavor and it makes it delicious again. So it's very, 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 very important that you allow your steak to rest. So do it. Don't miss that step if you want a good piece of meat. I like to serve these with some pickles. We made some zucchini pickles yesterday out of zucchinis, obviously. And this has a beautiful, sweet, acidic flavor which cuts through the fattiness of the meat. There you go. There's your perfect steak and what you need to do to make it. Thanks very much. See you next time.